policy making, my focus in education. So what we're going to be doing is, sorry, I don't know. We're just going to, can I have somebody read this over actually, just so we can all make sure we're on the table. Anyone?
U.S. Department of Education requests for the best grant committee in Washington, D.C. Dear prospective QFTV applicant, we are writing to inform you of the opportunity for your state to win a $250 million grant currently up for grabs as part of the U.S. Department of Education's Quest for the Best initiative. This initiative is intended to be a proactive approach to a state education reform, granting federal funds to states that can demonstrate innovative and efficient use of resources in the pursuit of increased student outcomes. In order to gain this $250 million grant, your state must successfully assemble an application that clearly describes how you would efficiently spend the grant given your state's educational performance. The way in which you choose to do this is completely up to you. That being said, our committee will be reviewing your application based on the selection criteria presented in this application packet. Thus, your policy proposals should flow from the criteria that you choose to represent in your application. The winning grant application will be the one with the greatest point value attached to it, as dictated by the selection criteria. Your group will have approximately 30 minutes to review this application packet and design policy suggestions for your application. Included in this packet is a brief history of the QFTV initiative, including its objectives, the application selection criteria, as well as pertinent data regarding your state's educational performance and expenditures, all intended to aid you in the construction of your application. At the end of the 30 minutes, your group will present at least 3 main policy points in your application to the selection committee and the peers, explaining why you chose to pursue this approach. Best of luck. We look forward to reviewing your application. Committee, U.S. Department of Education.
That was amazing. We are the QFTV selection committee. So you guys are going to be doing, your directions are all right there. You guys are essentially just going to be flipping through this packet. What it includes, like was mentioned, is a brief history and objective of this initiative, the selection criteria. So essentially, you're building an application with the greatest number of points possible, given what you think should be presented in the application. And then there's something called the Nations Report Card, which is a federal benchmark of different states and how they do on certain standardized tests. And so we have results for the state that you guys are portraying is Florida, FYI. So we have the report card for Florida and the subjects of math and reading for 2011, so you guys can sort of see how you're doing, maybe what areas you need to focus on in your application in order to build a strong application. And then just as a reference on the last couple of pages is the expenditures of Florida's tax dollars on education. So you might not have to look at that super in depth, it's just as a reference to see where you've been spending the brunt of your money so far. So you guys are going to have about 30 minutes, give or take, just to maybe look this over yourself and then talk with each other just to see what you think you should go about doing, and then we just want to hear what you guys come up with.
And it's up to you guys if you would rather do it as like a group of 6 or 7, or if you would rather split into smaller groups and work with 2 other people and just find it. It's up to you. Whatever you think would be, sometimes a smaller group is nice because you have more time to talk and process yourself, but a bigger group would be nice because there are more ideas. Do you guys have a preference?
I prefer working with a big group, but that's just me. So, should we vote? You can vote.
Okay. All for the big group. Okay.
And it was unanimous, so.
You guys think I'm going to give us some consensus?
I'm just so confused with all this stuff.
Basically, just feel free to, the numbers are there for reference and to make it feel more real, but just feel free to kind of look at the selection criteria and think, based on your own experience and some of the things you've talked about, although obviously we still haven't talked about a lot of stuff, think about what you would most want to change in your state school system, or what you think would have the biggest positive impact. Like Kay talked about different places that teachers come from. Is there something you could change in the path line to becoming a teacher in your state to make better teachers and leaders as a number E on the selection criteria. If you want to think of something like that. Or K was also kind of brought up the issue of standardized tests, like maybe one of your suggested reforms could be a more effective way of gauging student achievement than the one currently being used. Do you guys have, what questions do you guys have?
Are we looking for the thing that we think will like improve our state's performance the best, or the thing that we think will get us the largest number?
Interesting question. What do you think?
I think it would be more easy, but I understand where you're coming from. Maybe, I think it would be easier to think of it in terms of what you think would improve
Okay.
But if you think that, I mean, one thing we'll talk about at the end is like, at the end when we debrief, we'll talk about having gone through the process of trying to meet these criteria, like, do you think this is a good federal policy? Do you think, and if you're finding that what you think would actually improve education in your state comes into conflict with what'll get you points and money, that's obviously an issue. And so then we can talk about that at the end. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
So I guess how do we approach this? Like, should we read all of these things as a group first, and then, or should we all spend like 10 minutes just looking over and then talk for 20 minutes? Or do you guys have any suggestions as the people who be giving us money or not?
I mean, yeah, you guys might want to read through the history and selection criteria together. Definitely don't read
Yeah,
Every single number.
every single line. Students for Education Reform Wintersession?
Yeah.
And Reform 101? Yeah. Well,
What's happening here?
I'll
Excellent
Graham.
This will be my verbal haircuts, as well as my intrusion.
Okay, are you registered with us?
No.
Okay. Cool. Well, I'll go get you a folder.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm looking at the most points. So it seems like we need to articulate our education reform agenda and this other acronym of 3 letters, participation in the education reform agenda. So I could just get 5 points.
What is LEA again?
Yeah.
What is what?
LEA.
Where is that? Sorry.
That's E1 articulating state's education reform agenda and LRAA.
Yeah, everyone.
You mean like the money?
LEA is a person. It's like an administrative. Administrator.
I'm pretty sure you're right.
I just don't remember exactly what it stands
No, I don't remember.
Maybe. Do you know what LEA exactly what it stands for?
LEA. What is the context?
Articulating state's education reform agenda and LEA's education minutes.
Okay, so we get 0 points in that one.
I hope this process isn't quite as confusing when you're really doing it.
Probably is. We got more time.
Yeah.
LEA.
I think it's probably referring to the teachers meeting.
In short.
Or yours. Local education authority.
Yeah.
Yay!
I got it.
Or a local education agency. So that's the state and the school districts. Yeah.
Complying. Okay. Because this also, a lot of this stuff you also have to get the teachers units to sign on to get federal.
We should just say like
So-
Let's say, okay, we're taking away collective bargaining. That's the first step.
Okay.
That was Let's just say collective bargaining.
Negative 1 point.
Well, we do need to like provide effective support to teachers and principals, so they can collectively make like kind of fall
Okay,
into
so-
that category.
Yeah.
This is a dilemma. It's a technical.
Do a lot of teachers, when they first come in, I know this is the case in my middle school, whether it's a whole state or country, but like, sort of like after 3 years, you become part of the teacher union, and it's very hard to like get rid of the teacher. And so like if they want to fire them, they have to do it pretty quickly. And so I feel like,
Not in Wisconsin anymore.
well, if that were the case, like I feel like there should be some way of like really giving a lot of support and monitoring to their like new teachers, so you can see whether or not they're like effective, they have the potential to be effective, and like helping them get there, or like getting them out before they kind of get, you know.
I think we just have renewable tenure so that we never get stuck with a teacher.
Those are both great ideas for application.
So
those
many points for like us.
Well, let's see. So if we try to improve teacher and principal effectiveness
Yeah, I think
based
that's
on
the one.
performances also, then like that's like if we assess them and then provide them with feedback, and that would also go into like providing effective support.
I think the effectiveness of teacher and principal preparation programs, I think that there should be something like instead of just throwing somebody into school, like I don't know much about the UTEP program, but I was talking about it over lunch, and like you have like a semester of like observations before you.
It's like you have observation and practicum.
Like even though you observe like you're trained to become a teacher, I think that there should be some amount of time like observing and like being guided within a particular school.
If you're able to determine who like the best teachers are, and then you're able to like videotape them and have the teachers watch and do kind of like things like that, like professional development.
So I don't know if we're running out of number, but other than that, I noticed like okay, so 65 points. If we do A1, we also essentially do B1. And so I think a large part of it, even if our plan doesn't succeed, as long as we have a really detailed list of what our goals are for the district or for our school, then that gives us a lot of points in the proposal. But I also think that that's will sort of then lead to what we can do with the other goals. I think first section be focusing on what is it that we want to accomplish with our plan. Because if we know what we want to accomplish, then we're actually to do it instead of just saying, oh, we need to like raise this and raise this and raise this. We can make a comprehensive plan that we get a lot of points, and we can like focus on the rest of it.
So are we adopting common core standards?
What are the common core standards? Katie? No, I don't mean like what are they specifically, but you want to explain what the common core is?
Okay, it's a set curriculum that's adopted in 36 states so far. Where instead of, each state sort of developing their own curriculum, which I think grew out of the fact that whatever knowledge that was relevant was like geographic, right? But now in the 21st century, where we're not farming anymore, a large group of states have sort of agreed on a standard curriculum that's universal and that translates in every state. So the gaps won't be as wide.
So just a national set of standards.
Thank you.
But the history is not that too.
Isn't the whole standards thing up for debate? Like whether schools should have a common set of standards?
How does the common core compare to like other countries that are doing probably better than us, like what they're running? I mean, like, is it sort of like a common core that just sort of like keeps things kind of the same throughout the country and just some of the lower performing states up to par with the higher performing states and sort of lowers their standards from what they have separately, or is it like going to raise the entire?
Well, I mean, the goal is to obviously raise performance,
guys in for education?
We are.
Come on in.
Hello. Hi. Are you using that stuff? Okay, I'm gonna get your folder.
We're in the middle of a workshop where we're coming up with an application for federal grant money for our proposal on how to reform our state's education system. So you can look that up. So at any point in what are all of the reformers going to try to do is encourage the students in ways that will get their average scores to actually meet at least the national average. Right? Because which should therefore reflect that the education is getting better. I mean, because we're still, unless we want to come up with a whole entire new test.
Well, we could look at like states that have, like, states that perform higher than we do and kind of like look at their tests. Yeah.
So I guess what I was noticing is like for in reading, our system seems to be pretty good. We've been improving since, 03, and now we're hovering right around the national average. We dipped below in 11. And I don't know what national event would happen in 2010 or whatever to draw us down, but so it looks like at least for reading we're doing okay. For in math, we've been consistently 5 points below, even though our advanced students are all, like we have more advanced students in mathematics than we do in reading. So I think this is an area where we could take some of the funding that's going towards like reading and trying to either bring up the lower achieving students in math, or take some of the advanced money from math and bring up all the average scores in reading. So we do adopt course standards. We can sort of tweak them to be more specific to our state and be like, all right, we do these course standards, but we're already to be doing okay in the nation of reading, so we're gonna really focus on math instead of reading or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we want to take anything away from reading, because we're like so close to the average that bringing any resources from that would probably be something like that.
And we're already sort of
Yeah.
so that's not really. I mean, we've always been below in reading and math, so. But again, then we have the debate about the test.
Like, it might also be useful to look at what, kind of how our average is working, whether we have big gaps or whether most people tend to be around the same level, because that's if we're thinking about giving resources to math or English, maybe we want to be thinking more about sending resources to different schools. That might be pulling down our average.
There's discrepancies in various Black students performing lower in Florida, male students and national school and program students. I think this goes back to what Kay was talking about earlier, that the differences for lower income students can start before school. And so that's more work on programs at a lower level. Young children, bring on speed before that third grade.
There are also studies that show that you can do a lot, in elementary school, if you provide one-on-one or small group tutoring to students, and if you make sure you have really high quality teachers in school, that can actually close achievement gaps.
So are you saying that we should request more money for early childhood education programs?
I'm not saying that.
It should be
saying that.
I don't know if is it more money or more into programs or more effective teachers for programs.
Well, even more money, you can allocate to smaller classrooms and do better, as you said, improving achievement gap. If a kid doesn't come from not a very good background, more chances it's easier that they won't. It's more likely that they will have harder impact. And attention at early ages is helpful in making sure that they have the basic foundations to build off of in high school, middle school,
So a longer school year, I think we've shown that students from low income families tend to suffer the most from like a summer vacation, like a long summer vacation.
Yeah.
They usually can like decrease in their like levels of achievement and as opposed to like gaining like upper class students do. So perhaps like a longer school year.
Yeah, with a longer school day. I mean, we could like
Summer programs.
Or summer programs.
Summer
Yeah.
programs.
Because I'm also really checking real quick, like, it seems like a good portion of the budget already is going to early learning kindergarten education. It's on like the back of the first page, like over $400,000, it's like 13% of the overall budget. So I don't think it's a matter of money as far as the overall budget for Florida goes, but it might be a thing like teachers, or when, how early is it actually getting, to children, or who's, getting into programs, knows about them. Like, it might be a thing even like publicity or something, like not letting anyone even know about it.
summer programs might also like get more expensive than like extending than like reorganizing the school, like if you did like year-round schooling or if you extend the school day, like because you don't know what it costs to get like materials and like space and staff and things like that for summer programs. And it would be like a lot of new like fixed costs.
I think it's interesting on for funding, the grants or the assistance to low performing schools is only like $3 million or almost $1 million. So it's like it seems very small compared to a lot of the other.
I think because the thing is, like, when the state gives money or the federal government gives money to a lower performing school, like, they expect results, and those results don't happen, they kind of cut the grant and everything.
I think like maybe our biggest focus should be trying to get good teachers in the schools, and I mean, and in general, good teaching staff. So if we think about maybe providing some kind of like residency program, or like maybe even looking at our like higher education, and if we try to get our state higher education to like prepare teachers and maybe like, pay for their college education if they then like teach in the schools. And like kind of New York, I think, has done a little bit.
I love that idea a lot. I think that, because that incentivizes a lot of kids to then, if they know they're going to have a job, to go to college and become an educator in the state of Florida, which from like a purely economic standpoint is good for our state. I think it's good that we remember that we're bringing this S4, and like we're like, oh, we build a school, and then that's something like this. So I think that's a proposal that's specific enough that will actually like do something, and broad enough that it can get that in the state level without too much difficulty. So. Alright, so we're done. Proposal, we're going to get those college students to the residency, and we just earned ourselves $250 million.
Good teachers. Good teachers are, well, you have good teachers with experience. Like, I've had bad teachers who've been teachers for 15 years. And I've had good teachers who've been teachers for 15 years. Like, some people, they're made to be teachers, other people not so much. So I think even with that, we have to make sure that we keep tabs on them and make sure that they're actually doing their job and actually teaching children, because you can be a teacher for a very long time. But as you get older, for some teachers that I've met, like kind of get too comfortable in their job, or you've never been a really good teacher and you're not teaching children in a way that makes them learn, because in certain communities you have to be able to approach and connect with the children at a certain level to actually get them to actually listen to you and teach them, because people learn differently. So it's very important that teachers are able to actually conform to that and adapt in different environments. So that would be good, but we have to make sure that we're actually following the teachers and making sure that they're improving and they're providing results and that the children are learning.
Real quick was just, like, in our school, what we started doing last year was, we would have department heads for even the principal, like, about, like, once every quarter we go to different classrooms and, like, not give them any heads up and just, like, sit on a class. So in that case, like, if the teacher is, like, just letting the kids do whatever, you're gonna have to go and, like, he'll come in and, like, we'll kind of be that sort of tabs. It would be internal and the principal obviously would have to be in person. And the department head would have to care and, like, you know, be on tabs and things, but that's one possibility, we're trying to keep on tabs, because I know when we start talking about standardized testing, that becomes a whole issue in itself.
I think there's been like a lot of studies, or like there are a lot of studies going on now also about like assessing teacher effectiveness. And we did talk a little bit earlier about like doing professional development, making sure the teachers are doing observation and that they're like getting feedback on their performance and stuff like that. So like, you know, in our hypothetical education plan, we could also look into some of the systems, like I know of at least one for math instruction, one for literacy instruction, and one for like all subjects. And we could like look into using those, and those also allow for like videotaping classes and then having like computers outside the school as the teachers like highly trained and like calibrated and everything, of course, which also kind of accounts for like principals or like assistant principals and school staff members like bias a little bit.
They have to be more tenured. I know.
Yeah, well, we mentioned like renewable tenure, or like, you know, do something to make sure that teachers, that we don't get like stuck with teachers.
So I guess I see, originally we started off talking about curriculum and now we're taking a more teacher-centered approach. So should we sort of abandon the idea of focusing on the core curriculum, or is it a two-pronged approach? Because I think, Vanessa, you're right. I mean, I think teachers are sort of the core thing to deal with, and as Kay said, that's the most important thing. So that's where the plan then talks about making sure we have teachers, renewable tenure, and then they properly reviewed other peers who are on the side.
What would be the criteria for being discussed? Like tests as a criteria for reviewing, and isn't necessarily final grades, but what our option be.
Yeah, I really just read an article about this, or like, so testing, like the best way to assess teachers is to have like 33 to 50% of the assessment come from test scores. And then I think it was like 25% from like classroom observation and like 25% from like student surveys or something like that. Like if you want to achieve like maximum like validity and reliability, accounting for the fact that like there's some like statistical like flaws in all of those measures, obviously. So like in terms of, because your initial question was like, do we want to still talk about like our standards grade, which I think kind of goes back to the question of like whether we want to try to bring everybody up to the standard we have now, or like raise our standards and then bring everybody up to the base standard. But in terms of like reviewing teachers, I think it needs to be a combination of test scores and observation.
So what does the test scores mean? Does it mean like absolutely compare the class with students who are like targeted and disadvantaged and perform lower on test scores and comparing them to themselves to see how much they can improve? And like also, like, because I feel like that's a big thing.
Yeah, I think it's like value
Then
added.
otherwise it's just like,
Value added and not ask for test scores.
fire all the teachers to teach it.
Yeah.
The committee has a question. How do you guys, I heard unannounced observation visits mentioned at one point. How do you think teachers would feel about that?
It wasn't completely unannounced, it was like you knew it was coming about every quarter, or like within that month. So I mean, like, it's somewhat of a heads up, and I mean, I think it would have to be in a certain way where it's not like being judgmental. Like, because I mean, like, yeah, it would have to see it, but you also, like, we're bringing up, like, getting criticism, like, constructive criticism can also be helpful for the teacher. And the thing is, if you give too much heads up, like, if you're saying, I'm coming in on this day, then the teacher could just write one really good lesson plan, and then what does that leave you with?
Would they be able to prepare, like say, like you have notice of the week or maybe the day, so wouldn't they be able to prepare like tell their students in advance, or like maybe try to do something that's simple, so.
That's what I meant, like, that's why they didn't do like, or something.
Yeah, they did professional development and, they observed teachers, but I'm not sure how it worked at my school. I think they had heads up and a lot of the teachers would plan ahead and make sure that their lesson plans were up to date and like the students were doing something that made it seem like they were being very productive.
I feel like what should happen is like it's announced, but like if it's comes back sort of unsatisfactory, that like they not only talk to the teacher, but that they like add in more unannounced visits to see if it's a recurring pattern. It's like if you don't have to worry, like it's like once a quarter, if you're kind of like or whatever, once or twice a year, or whatever it is, if you're doing that, like that way, like because you can have like bad days or days when you like already like you taught a lot the day before and you want to just do the group work, so it's like you're not really teaching, even though like it's just part of the overall longer lesson plan.
Yeah. I also have a question. So if are these, you guys are talking about a combined model of evaluating teachers with test scores or value added between years of test scores, student surveys, and unannounced observations. What is the purpose of these evaluations? Like, are you going to fire the teachers who are the worst? And if so, how many teachers are you going to fire? Or are you just going to use, like you were saying, use it for feedback? So I think that also speaks to how the teachers might react. Like, if they know that the unannounced observations might get them fired, they might be less willing to comply with that change.
I really want to know more about this idea of filming a teacher and then sending it to a third party source. So I think that's the original question that Dan had was like, I don't know, my school, back in Wisconsin, like on the school board, the idea of having teachers review people in their department was presented, but there's a lot of animosity saying, oh, the teachers are competing against each other, or are sort of interpersonal like rivalries going to get in the way of these evaluations. So I'd like to know more about having third party think about that. It's really interesting because then that sort of takes some of the animosity element out of it, or they're like, oh, I know this person. But if you know that it's going to a person who's professional and isn't really like so invested in like you're gonna lose your job or not, just trying to do it for the students, then I think that is a very powerful tool.
So I mean, like I work for a research project where part of my job is like we get videos of 4th and 5th grade math teachers, and then there's this scoring system called the class scoring system, and you like.
I used to have a job.
Yeah.
The same job.
Yeah. Well, it's like you like spend 2 days getting trained to do it, and then like once a week you do a calibration exercise to make sure your scores are still matching up with like what the master scorers are doing, and you can just assess teachers that way. And so like that's a way of kind of getting it like avoiding like principal bias or whatever. And I think also in terms of like hiring and firing decisions, like and announced and unannounced observations, it's probably helpful to have like at least 3 observations a year. And like as soon as we have multiple observations, then we have options for like how many are announced or how many are unannounced, or do we want to have some completely unannounced and some where they say like, okay, it's going to be like within this week, like, and then you can give, I think usually states that are starting to implement techniques like this, usually what they say is if you have like maybe 2 or 3 years where you're like where your performance with like test scores and observations and whatever is like unsatisfactory, then like you shouldn't have the job anymore. Just like in any other job where you're not performing well, like you don't get to do it anymore. So like we can do something like that where it's not like an immediate decision, and where like if we do provide feedback and like coaching, then teachers have the opportunity to improve it if they don't do their job.
Maybe I was concerned because maybe you guys recommended that like if they want to keep their job, like if they're doing nothing enough, that they have to add in like some specific like training that we develop, or like a mentoring relationship somebody comes and monitor with like a better teacher, like work on things with them. I feel like there's nothing wrong with asking them for like they're not doing well, we're not just gonna like fire you with some observations, but like you'll have the chance to improve. So you have to go for this like extra.
I think all teachers benefit from a mentor, though. Should it just be reserved for on a performance model?
I think that comes like, is it, can we achieve what's ideal, or like is there like some independence? Maybe there's more of a limit than I think, like teachers who are proven to be very effective already. It's not that they can't improve, and I think most schools have like regular teacher development anyways. But like maybe they could serve more in the mental role, which is students benefit from teaching us as well anyway, so like, they do benefit from that. But I think their focus needs to be on the ones who aren't doing well, because I think every time I see a teacher like that in there for hurting the students, significantly.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's the question. Do you prefer graphic A, B, C, or D? You know, do we divert resources away from to bring like lower teachers, to increase the high teachers, or do we try and track them to be the same, or do we let the bad teachers go? So I guess first of all, how much time do we have left?
Yeah, we have a lot of time. I was going to suggest maybe take like 15-ish more minutes to kind of come up with a final proposal, and then we can like talk about then we can like debrief as a group like what this was like do you agree with this process, kind of like bigger picture stuff.
Pick like 3 main ideas.
Yeah, you don't have to write a proposal or anything, just pick and then.
Should we go back to the selection criteria and maybe look for like
Now that we've talked, maximize points.
The selection criteria are interesting if you look at it, you know, kind of the points are all in the great teachers and leaders category, which, you know, you could ask why or you could agree with it, disagree with that.
Intervening in low achieving schools is not only that. So see those achievers.
They're like ensuring successful conditions for high performing charters and other innovative schools and sort of 40 points, but like should more of those points go for like improving low achieving schools?
Well, technically,
The
turn
committee
around
makes
a
a
little.
question. The committee
Well, apparently only if you're able to change those achieving schools, do you also get that many points.
You get 10 just for trying, so like how
If we just say something about education funding, does that make education funding a priority?
We love education. But
Education should get nothing, there we go.
I heart education, not 10 points.
What is a longitudinal data system?
I don't know, but if we just access and use the state data as like accessing it, that goes to 2.5, then we look at it, and then.
Statewide longitudinal data system would allow you to like track students from like when they enter preschool to like forever preschool. I mean, like ideally
That's scary.
a really long time, so that you can see.
You get
like,
24 points for moving closer to the matrix.
So you can see like, you know, it was, I mean, and there are already like data sets like this, like
Can I see one?
that try to track students like through college and stuff, so that you can see like, you know, students from such and such a district, like, so that's how you get like correlations between like state achievement on state tests and like income when you're 30, like and things like that, and like likelihood of improvement and covered.
So, you're doing this exercise for Florida, right? How important is there again, you guys probably write down this, what metrics are used or have been used to determine how important this funding is to the education system and grant funding?
well, so you have the full list of the Florida budget, and you can kind of see the numbers, and you know you can see the totals, and you can see like total. Oh yeah, so total operating Department of Education, and then you can see $250 million is the amount you would get. So you can see from that the kind of, that's the maximum amount you would get. Because, you know. So in short, it's not a big proportion of the money. So are you saying, like, should we just scrap this whole thing? Like,
I mean, my experience, which is probably, at least in terms of time, whatever, similar to what your experiences in school, leads me to believe that the funding isn't that important. Depending, like, it's all It all depends on the individual situation, but.
But yeah, I think it depends a lot on where we put the funding and like a lot of the most effective like interventions have actually been some of the less costly ones. Like I don't know if you've heard of the Harlem Children's Zone. They have like charter schools and community interventions. And like what they do in the charter schools in terms of providing like good teachers and like holding students to high standards and like making everybody apply to college and stuff like that. Like it's way less costly than all the community interventions, but also like way more effective. So like I think if we try to focus on like directing our like however little money this is compared to our overall budget, if we do give it to like, you know, trying to turn around low achieving schools and like provide good teaching staff and things like that, then it can still probably be helpful.
I think more money is generally helpful.
Yeah.
Nice, anything you want to do.
It's just like I think funding is often used poorly, but
What can we avoid?
trying for what
How can we avoid using the money for?
research.
See, how confidence the overseer is the only ones allocated appropriately.
I mean, I don't think it's just about like making sure that the money is going to where we think it should be going. It's also about like making sure it goes to programs that we know or are at least like relatively certain are going to work, which I think is often the problem with like education funding, that people don't pay attention to what works, they pay attention to what they think will work.
So don't have that, let's just pay for one. Do this and then.
But I think we should go back to trying to get the 3 big ideas.
Yeah. You were writing things down, right?
Yeah, but, you know, I wrote a lot of things down.
I think the cheapest thing is concept which makes it rigorous, because like the paying back tuition, I don't think we'll be able to do it for a lot of people. Like a good, well, it'll still be some teachers though.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think the thing that we all agree on this, but evaluating teachers using what class evaluations. You said?
Sure, I mean, evaluation systems.
Okay, so
Yes.
evaluating teachers
And providing.
based on the class standards.
Sure, and providing feedback.
And then, I mean, if you want more details, I think at some point Florida should evaluate the evaluating system. But since we have 5 minutes remaining, we'll just do that.
And by getting better teachers into the lower achieving schools, will hopefully turn those around.
But how are we gonna focus on lower achieving schools?
Let's go back to the idea of providing residency programs for college students who are in the Florida system, who are community teachers, and focus on having those residencies with lower achieving schools, or against that, go back to the idea of a mentoring program and have teachers in lower achieving schools other mentor with teachers who are considered better in those elementary schools as by our teacher evaluation, or going to a higher achieving school with teacher evaluations that are better and something like that. So you want to do the residency approach or the mentorship approach? I think I chose the mentorship approach better, but
Yeah, mentorship approach is a better incentive, I feel, for especially college students. Like, I'm gonna get a mentorship, I'm gonna get real world experience at the same time. I have someone to kind of lead me through this. And instead of trying to get teachers who are already established at certain schools to come down and lower income students. At least for me, at least looking at that, that's not an incentive a lot of teachers would take. If they're established in a school, why would I want to go to a lower income, even if it's about the students? It's like I already have a place, I have a certain amount of income, going to a lower income school, my wages might go down, like it's just a better approach.
When we were talking about residency, were we talking about pulling teachers from higher achieving schools or like college students?
I wasn't talking about pulling.
Sorry.
But I think that raises a good point, because I think it's the same problem here with TFA. Like if you have a college student who doesn't have much experience, then you put them in a lower achieving school.
Yeah.
Or you put them in a high achieving school.
Yeah.
So I think mentoring is overall is going to happen, so you just focus on.
Also, if we look at the numbers, teacher professional development only that's on from almost 135 minutes.
Well, that's only restored 14 points, so hopefully we'll pay off.
Okay, so maybe doing the third thing. Or we don't. Maybe this is just the best 2 points that we go.
Because the LEA's participation in the education on the agenda instead of 65 points.
What do they do?
I mean, I think trying to get like local administration involved, like it's definitely something in terms of like having principals recommend like teachers who might be good for mentoring and like having schools maybe try to come up with their own standards and try to figure out like what we're looking for. Like if we do want to kind of develop like a teacher assessment tool, that's something that like local education administrators would be involved in. Like to kind of say like, you know, this is like where we want our test scores to be, and like here are some of the things we have in mind. Like, do you have ideas or do you think
So I feel like that kind of plays into our first objective of evaluating teachers. And so that's a little bit a larger category of that. If we're going to use the class system, we should make sure that each LEA is on board with that approach, and the administrators are enabling the teachers to properly be reviewed and make sure there's proper necessarily equipment to be reviewed and some states off of it. So I don't know what to do with the third category, but yeah, that's true. I guess maybe the final question that we had from earlier was, well, and maybe it's one other question too, other point too, but if we determine that a teacher isn't good enough, like do we let them go, or do we just increase the mentoring? Do we only mentor teachers who are like on the low track, or do we just teachers who are on the higher track too? Or does that fall under mentoring?
I think the committee side fine. So yeah, what are your final three proposals one more time? Sorry.
Yeah, so you just kind of like give your final pitch and sell it. Why do you think you should get home? Or which elements do you think is covered?
So I guess there are 2 bullets that we had down. First prong would be to probably evaluate teachers. So we're going to use the class evaluation system, but then over 4 years we will evaluate the evaluating standards to ensure that they're in line with our testing scores and our other academic goals, which are very detailed in the proposal. And the second bullet that we had was focus on mentoring teachers, both new and old, particularly those in low achieving schools. So that gives them a chance to have teachers who are rated on our evaluation system from bullet 1 in a positive light to sort of mentor them along, give them some pointers about how to deal with low achieving schools. Both for teachers that have been there a while and could use some mentoring if we determine that they're sort of falling behind the curve, and also teachers who are just coming into the profession, give them some mentoring so they sort of feel they have a solid footing to continue their career.
Okay, so the committee has a few questions. First question is, for the class evaluation systems, has the teachers union agreed to this?
Of course they have. Next question.
They've agreed to everything we want.
Wonderful. Good job. Is this the only way you're going to be evaluating teachers?
We're also using test scores
Okay.
and potentially student, I guess, like student surveys and small percentage, but no, it won't be fully based on evaluation.
We'll be accessing state data, actually.
What are you going to do with the evaluation scores of the teachers? Like who sees them, how are they used? How does it contribute to improving teacher effectiveness?
We can make like a general statement, like ask questions such as like, does the student feel like motivated in the class? Like less things that are talking about whether, like asking the children whether they like the
class or something, or like how big students can get more of an attitude of not whether maybe they like the subject or more based on teachers making them like understand it, and then from there we can incorporate it much more with the test scores. You have like a certain percentages, and it would be less percentage.
And that goes back to the question of how do we involve the LEAs. If we had administration on board, and so they're sort of saying, all right, I know that I'm in like inner city school, there's a lot of violence. We're going to focus a lot on like sort of aspects of our school community that we can be graded on for that school, graded on what kind of environment we create for our kids. And so I think that gives the administrators, gives the administrators flexibility to add that into the assessment, or if it's not important for the school district, sort of take it away, and that gets the LEAs involved in the discussion of the standard.
So the evaluations for the teachers, like not just the student surveys, but overall will be different by district?
So I think we sort of have our own core assessment of the things that are purely academic, and then things that are more student environment or like student engagement in the classroom. Administrators have a little more leeway.
So the administrators will also give them scores separate from the classroom observations?
I think they more provide. Now it's like in my perfect world, the administrators are the ones who can pose questions that then might be included in the class evaluation. But then it's up to a third-party evaluator who's sort of better at assessing those things. Like, so the principal is concerned with the school environment of like we're gun violence, so students falling asleep. The things need to be okay at home. That's like a particular care for that administration. Then the third-party viewer says, all right, from the classroom that I saw, it seems like students are achieving, they'll be engaged, but also use a set of core academic standards that are applied across the state.
Okay. So, sorry, I'm kind of going. Do you have any questions?
No.
Are you guys, like, how are you going to raise the quality of the teachers? I heard you guys talking earlier about feedback from the evaluation. I know I kind of asked this around, but what's the final decision when they firing people?
I think you want to provide them with support, like if a teacher goes through the year and like their value added is low and their like video ratings or whatever are coming back poorly, like we want to provide them with a mentor. And like I think we should give all of our teachers the opportunity to at least like observe some of our best teachers and things like that, so they all can kind of get that professional development. But in terms of providing like one-on-one mentoring, maybe only provided to the teachers who seem to really need it, and give them that support for like a year or two. And like if we're like helping them and if they're seeing an example of how to teach, and if we're giving them professional development, and then after a few years if they're still performing poorly, then it's probably not really our responsibility anymore to like keep helping them.
I think the mentor can have an evaluative role too, right? I mean, if they have a mentor, then probably they know a lot about teaching, and they'll also have a close relationship with the teachers being mentored. And so if they're able to say like, like there's no hope here. It's like this person's not going to become a better teacher. Or like maybe they see like, oh, they're really catching on. It's going to be good. I think they can have an evaluative role.
And I think we spoke earlier about having a 3-year trial period before tenure was made available for effective teachers. And so I think a new teacher comes in, or at least a 3-year period, if they're indicated that they're like really struggling, then we increase the mentorship, or provide them with like a better mentor or something like that. But again, that's the debate of do we focus more emphasis on the lower achievers and higher achievers. But then after that 3 years, so kind of progress that they made in the mentor, so it gives them the down vote. Then that's the form of the mentor.
So does this mean you guys have eliminated tenure for teachers?
I think we have a usual tenure.
Okay, so like renewed every
like 5 to 10 years, or maybe like every 5 years for a certain number of years, and 10 years after that.
Also, before we keep going, I just want to say this is all really interesting, especially since after this, the next thing we have is a talk from the head of the Massachusetts Teachers Association.
I said no teachers union would let us get away with it.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. You guys should ask some questions about these kinds of things. Because his teachers union is actually really progressive. Massachusetts is really lucky in that way, and that they're
a lot more progressive than teachers unions in some other states. But it's interesting. You should definitely ask him his opinions on some of these things that we're talking about. It's really interesting. Anyways.
So how, are these the guidelines for like race to the top?
Yeah.
Good question. Yeah, you stole the big reveal. So yeah, so this is actually, I know it seemed like maybe a little bit of a bizarre exercise at first, but it was based on an actual initiative, which if you look at the history, this is an accurate history of what Casey mentioned, which is an initiative called Race to the Top. Which is why I found your comment so funny about the charter schools having such a big portion of the selection criteria, because this is also the actual selection criteria for Race to the Top. It has to do with this certain agenda that Obama is pushing, which is very pro-charter, well, pro-teachers union and pro-charter school, which I appreciate. But so his ideology definitely shines through in this application, but we just wanted to give you guys an opportunity to sort of see what it's like to maybe try to build your own Race to the Top application. We actually have scorecards for Florida's Race to the Top application, if you just want to flip through it and see what they have to say and what scores they got.
It's very dense and technical.
Yeah,
It's
probably-
They didn't actually have just half an hour to come up with this.
They actually only have to
But like, so, these companies, like, when the states actually submit their proposals, are they very fragmented? Just like going from oh, like 65 points in this category, 40 in this one point, you know? Or like, do they focus on like one area? Like, 'cause I feel like what they were just sort of like a very fragmented approach, just trying to like get, you know, points, because the points are kind of weirdly distributed.
I mean, I think that's a really good point. Like, I think Melanie maybe asked at the beginning, like, are we trying to do what's best for the students in our state, or what will get us the most money? And I think that was a really big tension in Race to the Top. And historically, the federal government just gives everyone money, like, pretty equally. So it was pretty controversial to make it a competitive process and only give states money if they comply with what the Obama administration saw as most key to improving schools. And for that reason, like, I think in the original round of applications, Texas just refused to even participate. Like, they didn't even submit an application because they, Texas is very local control, state control type of place. And they just kind of took offense at the very idea of the federal government influencing their state education policies. But what did you guys think when you were looking at the selection criteria? Did this align with your own ideas about what would be important to improve education, or if not, if there are areas of tension, like where did you see them the most?
I think the thing I was most concerned with is like looking at the actual amounts of money that are spent on things. I feel like they can just spend like millions and millions of dollars on a very specific thing, like some very specific thing. But this, like, what are you looking at? Like, for example, $167 million on education, technology, and information systems. And like almost just like a lot of different things. And I feel like this selection criteria sounds like they're trying to turn around the entire education system from like pre-K through like grade 12 or maybe even college, and like just like reform everything from teachers to like the data they use, turning around low achieving schools, promoting charter schools, and it just doesn't seem to make sense for $250 million incentive. I feel like they should be focusing on like creating a specific program, or like, because it just seems like, considering that the overall cost of like all of the education, like all the different parts of it, is like what, like $16 billion. And these guidelines are so broad and so expansive that they seem to be covering everything that you can reform within all these categories. It just doesn't seem to make sense to me.
I think that's like part of what doesn't make sense to me about giving points for different categories and saying you have to apply to like get a certain number of points to get money, because like some of us would be like, okay, like I don't really, like I personally am not a big fan of charter schools, and in my like ideal state, like charters would probably not be a thing because I just don't think they're worth the money that they cost. So like I would forget about those 40 points, but then like if that meant I wouldn't get the grant, then that'd be a big problem for like the things that I think do matter, like teachers and like using data and things like that. So I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of the states that won in the very first round included new charter legislation, like increasing the number of charters that will work. I can actually read you some examples. If you talking about
Well,
it.
one thing I think was nice was that they say develop an common standard, but they don't say it's like specifically a test or they allow you to sort of have data. It gives you the flexibility and a lot of points for picking your own way of evaluating teachers and schools, things like that. So instead of saying here's this kind of test, you have to perform well on this, you have to look for flexibility for your state.
I think Race to the Top as an initiative walks a very fine line between federal imposition of certain ideas and certain policies and state-controlled schools. And I think Melanie's idea of the charter schools really highlights that. Is some school boards in some state governors don't really want anything to do with charter schools. So to have a policy that can be so impactful with the $250 amount was an actual amount. They went upwards to like $400 million amounts. Like these are pretty significant packages that states could do a lot with, for them to be, posited on things like implementing charter schools, like having that be such an impactful part of your application it just definitely goes into very dangerous territory regarding letting states have control of their education systems and trying to reform this initiative.
Also, I think, from my perspective on it, is that the money actually wasn't, it's a lot of money, but at the same time, a big factor was kind of the flashy media campaign, like it has a flashy title, Race to the Top. There was a lot of kind of public relations pressure for states to try to get the money to win the grant money and be like a Race to the Top winner within the various states, even though the money wasn't necessarily like a huge proportion of the Department of Education budget within the state. It was also interesting and something that kind of Arnie Duncan, the Secretary of Education, kind of invented in like a flashy, competitive grant.
I think my title is pretty good too. I came up with
yours is better because it rhymes. I think that's probably.
I should have been.
Yeah, you were the Federal Department of Education. But anyway, do you guys want to hear some examples of things that states did because of Race to the Top? So, since someone just mentioned charter schools, Illinois lifted a cap that they had on the number of charters that were allowed. Massachusetts made it easier for students in non-conforming schools to switch to charter schools. Illinois, Louisiana, and Texas expanded public charter schools. Big language about other states like strengthening charter schools, and that's pretty sure what that means. In terms of the great teachers and leaders part, which was like a huge proportion of the point, West Virginia created a merit pay system. Austin, Texas has created mentoring roles to mentor new teachers, so you guys had a similar thought process to them, I guess. It's kind of cool.
It's just awesome. They're Texas were like, and one city is going to try this.
Because it's a progressive city in Texas.
Well, actually, later they had district competitions, although.
Yeah, it's not, they're different levels. Actually, I think it is.
The district competitions were recent, though. No, first it was states.
Okay.
The district competitions happened pretty recently. Yeah, it's also similar to what you guys said, a peer assistance and review program for struggling teachers in Connecticut. Let's see what else is interesting. California enacted legislation to link student achievement data, test scores, to teacher and principal performance as a result of the contest. So, and yeah, the District of Columbia created a performance-based teachers contract. So teachers would get paid depending on how their test scores were, which is pretty crazy. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Like, do you think this is a worthwhile thing? Do you think it's good that Arnie Duncan and the Obama administration had Race to the Top? Do you think it had a positive impact based on the kind of limited knowledge we all have of it?
Well, so I'd say I think it's positive, and I think, we talked about how we should focus on the specifics, but I think in a way, having the focus on the broad proposal allows for more innovative thinking, and I think that even if you're successful in the grant, you just sit down and think about these different things and try to work them out as long as there's a constant incentive to be thinking about these topics and things that turns out to be good ideas. So I do think it was worthwhile in that, we got us thinking about what we would do. And I think United States thinking a lot about education where sometimes, there's a lot of things going on in the state. Something you think about, but when you have a flashy name on the media recognition, you know that you're competing against other states. I think it's your best people work on it.
Yeah, were you gonna say something? Sorry, you
Basically the
just
same
looked
thing.
at. Yeah.
I'm interested in more in the district level. Yeah, I didn't hear much about that before. Like I've heard about states, so like you mentioned they started doing district level competitions. I'm interested to see if that's more or less effective, or whether or not like low performing districts don't have they're lacking some leadership to provide them with the knowledge to know what's best to improve. If that was the reason that they were doing well in the first place. Or whether it's going to be better that it's more personalized to the districts. Like depending on who's like writing the proposal and like if they're what they see as being effective is something that they just need the money for, or if they just aren't seeing what can be effective.
Well, also then there's competition between districts in the same state, which may produce a better statewide, more statewide solutions than just competing against other states.
But
Oh, I was just gonna say if anyone's interested in the district winners. So I don't know where the Austin, Texas facts I had came from. That's a mistake in my notes probably, but so the district winners was announced really recently. I'm trying to see. So this mid-December, like a month ago, and the winners are interesting. Some of them are charter management organizations, which is interesting. So one of the winners was KIP DC. Are you guys all familiar with what KIP is? If you're not, that's fine. The Knowledge is Power program. It's a really big charter management organization. So it's like a nonprofit organization that manages charter schools around the country that are all named KIP something. So there's one in Massachusetts called KIP Lynn. And I think, are they opening one in Boston? Isn't it its first year this year, or is it first year next year?
They just got their proposal authorized, so I think it might be next year.
Yeah. So they're charter schools. So KIP is like in the place of the district, KIP is kind of the umbrella management organization for schools around the nation. So it's interesting that KIP DC, which is not even a district, was one of the 16 winners. And so were IDEA public schools, which I believe are also charter schools, and that's a network in Texas. So I don't know. I'm interested, Melanie, why do you, tell us about your opinion on charter schools.
Okay, so my opinion on charter schools is that first of all, only 17% of charter schools are actually better than like traditional public schools. So like that in itself is enough to kind of like make me doubt them. And I know they haven't been around for that long, so like a lot of my assessments may not be fair. But I think that charter schools are supposed to apply the principles of free market economics to public education, and so far they haven't been shown to work. And a lot of them, like the kids schools, for example, like will kick out kids who like aren't behaving well, like aren't performing well, and like even Moskowitz's schools like don't believe in learning disabilities. So like if kids come to them with learning disabilities, they're like, no, you're making that up, and like you can't go here until you like get over it, basically. And so I have problems with those philosophies, and I think that like charter schools have not shown to, like they're supposed to make the public schools around them perform better because they're supposed to inspire competition, and they haven't been shown to do that. And I don't think that they've proven that they can expand to accommodate increasing demand. Like most of them have lotteries that like way exceed the spaces they have, and there isn't really anything that they can offer the students who like don't get into the lottery. And I just think that they haven't proven that they're going to be like a long-term solution, and that like they're like less cost efficient than public schools. And I don't know, like Roland Fryer is doing a project where he basically tries to apply the practices of like the best performing charters to public schools, and it's like going really well, and like closing the achievement gap in Houston. And like I would much prefer to do that than to continue providing money to charters when I think like so many of them don't work, and then the ones that do work aren't like really fixing education. They're just like providing increased opportunities for kids.
So if your point about the lottery about not being able to meet demand, is that false to the charter schools or more so districts or states that they're situated in? Because the reason that they can't meet demand, like KIPP for instance, probably does have the power to meet demand because they built such a network and have such a talent pipeline that if they were allowed to, they could probably expand their schools to a lot more places. But what's preventing them from doing that is a cap on charter schools in Massachusetts, for instance. We currently have a cap where we're about to hit the cap in Boston at least. And KIPP was only able to open up one more school, but I'm sure they probably could have opened up more had that cap not been there. So is the lottery issue and not being able to meet demand really the fault of the charter schools?
I guess it probably depends on like the kind of cost per child of whatever charter school you're talking about. And also like charter schools do get funding from other sources. So like I don't know, it's possible I guess that there are charter networks that exist that like could get enough funding from the state and from other sources to serve like every kid in the city, which I guess like would be great. But another way of doing that is like taking the best practices of charters and giving them to everyone without waiting for the charter network to expand.
Okay.
So,
but it's kind of hard to get the innovation that you get from those top charter schools that you're, thinking of drawing from. I mean, if we didn't have the charter system, we wouldn't be able to draw from them and apply what they've learned to public schools, right? But the whole point is innovation. Even if we have 17% of them performing better than public schools, like if 5% of those ones come up with a brilliant idea that we're going to be able to apply to the whole country, and I guess that's kind of the point. Is like innovation from the technology, even if it does, like more often than not, do worse. Like the top 5% of the ideas could be applied.
I agree that that is the point.
It's fine, you can keep it, do that.
I don't believe that we're sufficiently applying that right now, which is the
Yeah,
problem.
okay.
Like the way that most charter schools exist right now is that they have like they serve a certain number of kids and they do really good things for those kids. And the kids outside the charter schools are unaffected by the charter schools. Like, whether that's because there are caps on charter schools, like, yeah.
Oh, well, just to push back and kind of, sorry, what was your name?
Nick, sorry.
I missed when you came in, I think it was outside. Anyway, so to add to what Nick is saying, in the Houston experiment that Roland Fryer did, one of the 5 innovations, I guess, quote unquote, that they added to the traditional public schools was to have lots of intensive tutoring for the students.
Right.
The people who recruited and trained the tutors that worked with the students in small groups were actually a charter management organization located here in Boston, and that's actually the charter school that I'm visiting tomorrow. Yeah, so Match Education. So in that sense, you do see like the charter schools are directly the source of the innovation in that example. And I'm not sure who would be training the tutors if Match Education didn't exist.
Yeah, like I think that you do see like positive effects of charter schools kind of expanding in some cases, but like at this point, I think that the way that charter schools are expanding, like I would prefer to take the resources that are going to charter schools and put them at other places, because I think that like the like marginal benefit of like giving money to charter schools is less than the marginal benefit of like improving teacher education programs and like making sure that every student has like good teachers and good principals like for every single year that they're in the public education system, and making sure that every student is like close enough to get to a good school and like things like this, that I think just like our money would be much more valuable going to that than going to more charter schools.
Is it a problem if some of those, like if you want to keep around the charter schools that are doing good, like what are the goals of like, is there a way to get rid of the ones that aren't working and just like keep the most innovative ones, or like have, I really don't know much about charter schools, or like have guidelines that like make sure that like the benefit of the charter schools is like such that it's not just benefiting students in the school, but that there's like some benefit that can be applied to this like, state level, otherwise they don't like continue to receive funding. Because I feel like that you don't need to cut all of them if they're doing really innovative things, but if only a small percentage of doing those things, certainly shouldn't cut all of them.
Yeah, well, to answer the first part of your question, the 17% figure is from a national study of charter schools, but first of all, certain networks, like the KIC network, for example, are consistently outperforming peer traditional schools. And also, it kind of depends on the region or city that you're looking at. There's been a lot of research on Boston where they compared students who entered the lottery of charter schools. Oh, okay. Thanks, Vanessa. So that there have been studies in Boston where they took, like, because their charter schools have such high demand, they took students who didn't get into them, but who had kind of had the initiative to apply them, and compared their learning growth over several years to the students who did get into the charter schools to like match them in terms of race, socioeconomic background, and they found that the charter schools were effectively closing the achievement gap in Boston. So Boston is a case where you have like not a huge proportion of charter schools in terms of the amount of students that are served out of the total, but the ones that are here are very high performing because the cap makes it really competitive to open charter schools. But I think you would see that varying a lot across the country. That was only the first part of the question, though.
Yeah,
Do you want to say the second part?
What's the most like I feel like if the money is being effective, then I don't have any problem with charter schools. I think Melanie seems like that only with only 17%, like various things like I think it's true that if like money is going to schools that aren't really benefiting, then it could probably be very cost efficient elsewhere. So like what are the ways in which you can pull funding charter schools or like force them to close or
So, you want to take?
Before-
So, we took the same charter school class last year, so charters, in order to open, a group like Kay mentioned in her presentation can just propose an idea in a very detailed charter application, and it gets approved by the Charter Authorization Council of the state. So the way that charters aren't living up to certain expectations in terms of most often through state assessments, I believe, then their school will be closed because they're not living up to the expectations of the charter, and they're up for reauthorization every 5 years, I believe. So they have every 5 years to make sure that they're performing up to par, and if they're not, then the state has the authority to close them down. That being said, just to go back to Melanie's initial point, because I do like when people push back on this idea of charter schools, because I feel like especially those who aren't as immersed in education research, they often are pushed in like the media as like this really catch-all like great thing that's going to solve all the issues in education. But the reality is that nationally they do follow the normal distribution where there are a select few that are performing above traditional public schools. Most of them are performing at the level of traditional public schools, and then there are some that are performing below traditional public schools. So you really have to talk about them within certain contexts. So we can talk about them within the context of Massachusetts, where they're actually doing quite well. And that has to do with the way that the state is actually allowing them to open. So Massachusetts only allows a certain amount of charter schools to open in the state. And this is done to ensure quality of the charter schools, so that you're not just having a bunch of crappy charter schools open because there's a bunch of people who think they want to go to the charter school because they've heard that it's going to be a great thing, that might not be. So, but then you have other states like Michigan or whatever that has a bunch of for-profit charter schools that aren't doing very good things at all. So you do have to contextualize a little bit. There's something else I wanted to say too, but I forgot.
Another thing I wanted to say was an issue you run into when you're opening or closing schools. This entire time we've been talking about how good charter schools are in terms of test scores. So that's kind of one thing that came up in your discussion of the grants. Like that's kind of up for debate. Like especially given the test question example that Kay showed us. Like what are the test scores really evaluating? Are they really evaluating deep learning? One criticism of charter schools is that a lot of students will, get great test scores and through the kind of intensive help the charter school gives them, successfully matriculate to a college, but then they don't have the skills to finish college, which seems to suggest something lacking in the education literacy case as well. Or another example, the school that I mentioned earlier, Match, which we'll get into tomorrow. We learned this in K's class. They have really good test scores, but their students have historically done really poorly in the SAT. So they do well in the MCAS, the Massachusetts Standardized State Test, but they don't do well in the SAT, which is interesting because I would think that those would be testing kind of similar things.
I don't know if they are, though, probably taken.
Yeah, I'm not from Massachusetts, so I don't really know.
So,
MCAS, it's so funny, because the question she showed us compared to like what other countries are learning was from the MCAS, and the MCAS, like Massachusetts, it's like a state that a lot of times is looked to for like more ideal education, but even those tests don't even compare in the standards of what they're like asking of students compared to like other countries, like with like the word problems that really make you think. Like I was actually thinking about those other questions I was about, like you know how to like
Distribute.
Yeah.
distribute. So therefore, you must know math and you must know how to apply it in the real world.
Yeah. So you're saying that are you saying that MCAS are like really way easier than the SAT? Or, okay.
Same with CMTs in like Connecticut, like supposedly has like your kind of teaching standards and stuff like that. Like that's part of their education system. So I think that's kind of this thing for every test. It's a much more, what facts do you know?
Which is scary. And I actually, so New Orleans is like often held up as a beacon and for charter movement, because it's very close to being 100% charterized and will be like in the next year. And one of my good friends is in her second year of TFA working at the highest performing charter school, which is like in New Orleans. And I got really freaked out talking to her about it because when I met up with her over winter break, she was telling me that she was like, oh yeah, it's almost test prep season. Like, we're going to have to start giving them standardized tests every day to help get them ready for the Louisiana state test. And I was just like, that is horrifying. And, yeah, and I mean, maybe they're doing well on state tests. Maybe kids are consistently doing well on state tests, but if some of them are doing that by drill and kill test prep methods, it's really kind of disturbing.
I was talking to pre-K teachers that I helped like over this summer who do like summer program at one schools, and they were talking about it, like for kindergartners, like people like, because they're starting like third grade and stuff like that, like they already have to start thinking about teaching the tests. Because like they move around within their school, like what schools they're assigned. But I mean, they're talking about like they hate it. They hate having to teach with tests. Like you can't just teach kids, information anymore.
MCAS, I don't know what other states, but MCAS, you start in third grade, you take MCAS every single year until you pass it for graduation requirements in high school. So it's like a significant amount of time. Like I had friends who went to like a private Catholic school in town, and they didn't come until like high school, and then they had to enroll in high school and then pass the test, and like they're really smart, and they were just not prepared for it because they didn't spend time teaching the test. But like it seems stupid to me because like they were just as engaged in other debates, they were doing just as well in honors classes, like with the law council, but like they didn't do very well on this test.
What do you guys think is do you think it would be better to get rid of standardized tests or to change the test, which I think Kay was kind of hinting at? I imagine that's her opinion, is to make them more, involve more complex thought, kind of like the international test examples that you showed us, or, a third solution that I'm not thinking of right now. What do you guys think?
I really liked the math questions she showed us earlier. On the other test, like I generally never went in favor of standardized testing, but if what you were teaching to was this idea of like creative thought and like deep thinking in like real world applications in math and like the race track problems she showed us and the stuff, like then I think that would be more effective because like I think that's sort of teaching the things that teachers wish they could teach anyways. Or testing things teachers wish they could teach. But the problem is that like teachers are teaching to the test, and so like if the tests are asking 12 times x plus 14, then what they're going to be doing is like worksheets like that. But if the tests are going to be all focused on those kind of problems, then the classroom experience would focus on it, which I don't think would be a bad thing. So I think testing can be fine as long as it's testing things that you want modeled in the classroom.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I think we should definitely have testing. I think it's like I think I've definitely heard people say that we shouldn't have testing, but it's like I don't know how else. Like you need some kind of like on the. I also think that like our tests should be national and not state based. I don't know, like I don't really know enough about the Common Core as it exists now to know if that's what I would want it to be based on, but like I think it's weird how different like every state is.
The Common Core does have There's people like developing kind of, they're supposed to be more complex tests for the Common Core. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, what is the Common Core?
What is your one?
So the national standards. So, so I guess I'll give you a brief history. So, are you guys familiar with No Child Left Behind? So, No Child Left Behind was implemented to try to like force states through accountability measures to get their students up to a better level of performance. One of the unexpected outcomes of that was that certain states, in order to increase their AYP, adequate yearly progress, would dumb down their tests. So you had a lot of southern states who would create tests that were just atrociously easy so that their students could pass and look like they were achieving progress. So in order to sort of curb some of that, the disconnects between states in terms of what we want our students to learn and be able to do, Obama's proposed the Common Core standards so that we have a national set of standards. It's not exactly like a curriculum. They're giving states freedom, so they're not saying that every state has to teach the exact same thing. They're saying every student in the country has to have this set of skills. So the way in which you get them to these set of skills is up to you. And they're divided in between content and skills. So like writing skills, being able to construct an effective thesis, being able to lay out a paragraph, an essay in effective form, things like that, as opposed to content like knowing the causes and effects of the Civil War. Like they're more upper level thinking that we need to get our kids to, but you can do so in a way in which you see fit. And the way he's but he can't impose those, states have to adopt them. And the way he's incentivizing states to adopt the Common Core standards is you're only eligible for Race to the Top funds if you adopt the Common Core. So states that have one Race to the Top funds have adopted the Common Core, and now they have to work on actually implementing it in their schools. So Massachusetts is working on implementing their Common Core standards and like teacher evaluations and making sure that their teachers are teaching students according to the Common Core. That makes sense. There was something else. So you reminded me, no, I think that the test score question is really interesting because, like, especially going back to the charter school thing, like, KIPP is often regarded as, like, the pinnacle of charter schools. Like, it's one of the first charter school management organizations to come about, and they have achieved on standardized tests across the board, like Nadine was mentioning. But I remembered I saw that something like 46% of KIPP graduates will graduate college within 6 years. So that's like really low, especially when you look at their amazing test scores. But at the same time, that's quadruple the national average of like that demographic of kids who will graduate college within 4 years. So it's also interesting to think just like, so we have these charter schools, we have these dilemmas that they're bringing about in terms of like actual performance at the college level, which is arguably what a lot of people want to see among students graduating high school. And then this idea of like passing tests in order to let these schools stay open. But at the same time, they're still helping students more generally because otherwise they're not getting there at all. Which I just think is really interesting.
But why do these kids go off to school after being kept? Because that might be also part of the problem. Is like if you stay in the community, that gives you kind of less incentive, especially if you're from low income, because you're not probably to actually do well and stay because you're there, and it's kind of the effects of the community are kind of bringing you down to that in certain levels. Like, do these kids go off far away, or do they stay? Things like that, and they might stay because there are no incentives to go out because it's cheaper.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, I've read a lot of articles about people who, like you said, they like going away is really scary to especially to like a competitive college, and no one in your family has done it, and you don't really know what that's going to entail. And I think that's a lot of what's going into the low college graduation rate to begin with. Is just them not having like the social capital necessary to really be able to succeed at the college level, which is something that's maybe not talked about as much in school. It's like aside from actual academic capability, it's just like being able to navigate the pathways to get you to successful college graduation. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure if I missed this because, and speaking of testing, the school is supposed to visit tomorrow, just emailed me saying that the students are going to be taking tests, so we won't be able to go to the classroom. Which is kind of ironic. So we're going to decide if we'll still go. But I don't know if anyone saw the New York Times article over the break about this issue. Is that why you brought it up?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I just read it.
It kind of strikes me like, I saw Waiting for Superman and like, one of the, like it's just like people stay in the community, and so it's kind of just like they do great in high school and they're tough their class, and then just when they go away they're like scared, they're scared, and they
oh sorry, go ahead.
no, just they can't navigate the waters, and so they kind of they fall through the cracks.
Yeah, or in the case of the article, the three girls that were profiled in the article, they had like families and friends like urging them to come back, which I imagine would be so hard. And I actually talking to the woman who runs Boston Collegiate Charter School in Boston, she was kind of talking to me at one point about students from her school who go to college, and one particular student who was like their valedictorian, who had gone to college and really hated that she was in another state, really just was having a really hard time with the kind of social adjustments, and her parents were like, just come home. And she was also in close contact with the school, and the school was like, stay there, stick it out, it'll be worth it, and they were trying to offer her support, but when her parents were telling her to come home, she went home. Yeah.
It's just, no,
There you go.
No, you go.
You go ahead.
It's really hard because, like, think about how, like, when you guys were doing your policy suggestions, you went to evaluating teachers, mentor programs, like standardized tasks. This is like pretty mainstream stuff in education, but it's like we almost can't consider like this really important stuff, like the social aspect of it, and just supporting kids in general, because we're so concerned with like standardized tests and making sure schools are performing up to par and all these other measures that just almost have nothing to do with what it's actually like to have to make it through college, which is again something that I think we all have a goal in mind for what kids should be able to do once they graduate high school.
Yeah. Or just thinking about like getting more kids to graduate high school, how much it has to do with kids just, I don't know, hating school, and how much that has to do with issues outside of school, which I think was brought up during someone brought up issues outside of school during the discussion.
In my imaginary world, where administrators would ask questions.
But yeah, I don't know. You know how Cameron mentioned Ron Ferguson during her talk, and she was talking about like the achievement gap even within particular socioeconomic class or parental education levels or something. He's talked to us before, and it's interesting because when he was asked, which do you think has the biggest impact on kids, like the school, like if you could intervene in one area, I think the three areas were parents, teachers, or I think like the overall community, teachers, parents. And his big thing is that like the achievement gap is completely resolved things that happen at home, and a lot of his work has to do with educating parents, because his research kind of pushes the idea that like the schools actually really can't achieve that much without changes to family and home life. Which is a completely different perspective from, I think, Kim's perspective.
Everybody can see that,
But I think I
true, that's
Yeah.
to a certain degree. Because
What did you?
I know people are thinking of just if they come from a harsh family, but I even went to middle class. And one time literally I came in to my freshman honors science class, and the teacher had just a lower level class, and he was about to cry because he had just devoted a whole class asking, what do you really want to do past high school, because you need to learn this. And they're all just well, I can just with my parents, I can just have my whole life living in their basement, and I can go maybe sell some drugs, and that would be fine. And they were completely serious. That was all they wanted, because in their minds, their parents could always just take care of them. And I mean, I can see that. I can see that falling into it. I mean, to me, it's completely irrational. I would never want to be a burden to my parents that way. But I mean, parents obviously have a thing, if you are too almost caring to the point where yeah, I'll take care of you no matter what, trust fund, you don't have to do anything. Or if you're coming from a home where it's you don't have enough money, to pay food, and you feel you have to go and get a job, that makes sense too. So I mean, we cannot totally ignore what your background is, what your parents are. I mean, I had a friend who even did graduate from high school, but then since he was living at home and he has all these siblings and stuff like that, he felt it was much easier just to stay at his job at Radio Shack and keep trying to do college too. I mean, it goes both ways. I don't think you can ignore that. Sorry,
Oh no, I also think it's important, parental involvement, knowing what's happening with your child and education. At least in my community, a lot of the parents weren't involved, and it's mostly because my community, a lot of the parents are first generation, and they don't really understand how to navigate the system, or they're scared to navigate the system. And so if you educate the parents and they're more aware, because I feel, at least for me, coming from the background I do, if you're first generation, you want your children to do well. So if you're aware of what you can do, you will do it. And so I think it's important that that people do allocate time to educating the parents and making sure that they know what's happening, because it's detrimental as you go further, because parents sometimes have less control of their children, and so as they go further, it's you can't really help them later on.
I think in my experience, it was mostly kind of with behavioral problems. If the parents aren't mature and have had their kids at a young age, the kids are not gonna respect teachers or even want to learn in the first place. So if you don't have the parents on board, then the teacher can't do anything. To most kids, I'm not saying it's not possible, but a lot of kids it just won't go through. If the parents don't care, they're not cheating for anyone or for anything. So
it's hard to get the motivation.
Yeah.
And it's not saying it's gonna work, because some parents are like that, they won't listen. But you can reach out to certain parents who do want to change, who do want to do well.
So even if your parent doesn't have the most, isn't educated, if they want that for you and if they're pushing you, you can do it.
Yeah.
Well, here, I
Want to hear someone with
Sorry,
an
yeah,
go for it.
Alternative perspective. I completely disagree with surprisingly enough. Mostly because I think it's really easy to believe that parents have an effect, and I think it probably is true. Okay, my mom taught me to read before I was in kindergarten. Did that affect the way my education felt? Probably. But I think that there's a big difference between saying parents have an effect on education and we cannot fix education without fixing parenting. And I think that if you say we cannot fix education without fixing parenting, then you fall into the trap of well, how are you going to fix parenting? And nobody really knows how to do that. So I think first of all, it's a logistical problem if you decide that parenting is a problem. Second of all, I don't think we have good research backing up the fact that if you fix parenting, it's gonna fix education. And third of all, I think we do have good research that says if you intervene in schools and if you intervene with teachers and if you do things like that, then you can overcome whatever parenting effects there may be and improve students' education without intervening with their parents.
I'm sorry.
I just think that I sort of agree with Melanie, and I think it can have a huge effect if you can, work on the home life and different aspects of that. But I think that plenty can be done just within the education system. I still think summer vacations are one of the biggest problems, because I feel the one video that I've seen, I don't exactly know where it came from, but I'm fairly certain it's the internet. The low income students, students from middle and high income families, they continue learning during the summer. There's a lot of it starts at a young age. The parents speak to them more. They have more sophisticated vocabulary. They're more books in the house. They'll be encouraged to read. by example, newspapers, things like that. The low income students in the summer actually tend to decrease, and like I feel like studies have shown that like the effects of school for low income students during like from the beginning of the year to like the end of the year can be like incredible for the low income students, but that like it's lost by the time they come back, and like every time you come back and it's been lost, you have like you need to catch up with those students that are already behind the higher students, and then they can track to the lower level, and like that's how you're in high school and you're on the lower track. It's like less encouraging to go to college. So I think that.
Like, I feel like it, to some extent, like if all the parents like that are in a community, then it becomes a community problem too. And like at least from my experience, when parents aren't involved, it really does show. And that even though like the school can do things, the district can do things, if it's a community problem, like there's not much the district can do. Like going back, I'm sorry, what's your name, Jessie? Going back to what Jessie said, if it's a behavioral problem, not much the school can do.
Yeah, but I think it's just been shown that like by having summer vacations, that's when the family can have the most effect, and that if the lower families are not having the effect, and so if you can't change the families, I think what you can do to show significant improvement, maybe not fix the problem, is to not have such long summer vacations, because you take them away from like this extended period of 3 months where their only influence is the parents. If you can't fix it, you need to like put them in an environment where they can actually learn.
Do we need to go into? Well, if anyone is interested in talking about parental involvement or charter schools, their thesis is on both. So if you're curious, how do you feel about parental involvement? How do I feel about it? I mean, there's a ton of research showing that it makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
But I think I agree with you that it's often used. It's used as I don't think it's like warrants being used as a counter argument for efforts in school reform, which it is by a lot of people.
Sorry, like I just never saw it as that.
Yeah,
like just saying, oh, because we can't change parents' decision for you.
Yeah.
Still have teachers who say like I can't do anything about teaching the kids in my classroom if they're like not eating breakfast at home and like not eating breakfast.
See, I would see that as motivation.
Like I would be like, I'm so motivated to like try to help
I
this.
feel like we should start taking notes on like a list of articles to send out at the end, because I read a really interesting article. It was like called like The Exhausted Teacher or something, and it was a teacher writing basically a piece on how he feels like there's so much focus on education reform because it's not politically correct to talk about like reforming the family. And he was arguing that that's the real issue at the core of a lot of the things that education reform is trying to solve. That being said, first of all, like I said, I think it's ridiculous to say that schools can't improve regardless of what happens at home. Like I think anyone who's ever attended a public school knows that for most of them there's a lot of room for improvement, no matter what family they're being served. Like even in the other districts, probably the public schools still have a lot of room to improve. And second of all, one thing I do appreciate about charter schools is that although I will say that I agree with a lot of criticism of them, and my thesis is kind of criticism of charter schools, but I will say that a lot of them are getting students to college that wouldn't have gone to college if they had gone to charter school. So in that sense, like in a lot of the cases, you are dealing with parents who are really focused on education. So these may be necessarily, there are some kids who don't come from families like that, but probably in most of the cases, these aren't the families that are like, making it really hard for the students to do their homework because there are all these other things going on. But on the other hand, like these are also families who their kids had gone to traditional schools not doing as well. In a lot of cases, their kids might have not applied to college. And in that sense, we should be taking lessons from the charter schools and applying them to traditional schools. But I personally think charter schools have gotten a lot of kids to college in the past 10 years that wouldn't have gone otherwise.
Of the original purpose too. Like charter schools were created so that we could borrow best practices and apply them to traditional public schools, like Lowland Friar is doing in Houston. It's just that, and I had trouble sort of pinpointing where this the nexus of this breakdown is, but there's been a breakdown between traditional public schools and teachers unions and whoever else in charter schools to where, you know, it's become this idea of like, let's just make more charter schools rather than actually improve the relationship that we're supposed to have between charter schools and traditional public schools.
You think it may be because of the environment that they foster, of like wanting everyone to be in certain public schools, that might not be the environment. Like, I don't know, like especially getting kids who might come from low-income areas, like having that kind of environment where you don't necessarily have other people telling you, oh, you don't have to go to college, like you need to go to college. Like when you compare them, that might be something that charter schools have. That traditional public schools have really.
Yeah, charter schools are definitely, they're often criticized for being more paternalistic, people call it. Like, not everyone believes in going to college, but that's the mission of many, if not most, charter schools, is to get kids to college. So, you know, you're often going into communities where it might be like the norm to not really be thinking about college time and sort of about college and sort of drilling them with this idea of going to college. And you have to think about like, is this really the right thing to do? Should we be pushing college for everyone, like even people who maybe don't necessarily believe in it, or maybe can think of another way in which they want their life to go? It's sort of imposing this idea upon people that maybe we shouldn't be doing.
And I was just about to ask, like with the lotteries for charters, do they just put all students who are going to come of age to get into the school into that, or do their parents or the like the students themselves have to have the motivation to like enter into the lottery themselves? In which case, that's kind of self-select.
But the lotteries are very different depending on what charter school you go into. So like some are much more time intensive, and like with like the Harlem Children's Zone, they like walk around the area and like knock on parents' doors, and they're like, here, sign this sheet of paper, and it will like enter your kid into the lottery. So like it depends like where you're.
Sorry, and if anyone's interested in joining us on Saturday, some members of SFER Harvard will be going door to door doing exactly that for a charter school in Boston. So if anyone wants to come, we'll probably talk more about it tomorrow. But
We can debrief the process afterwards.
yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you though. Actually, also another thing I want to say in response is that our policy agenda that we made last semester, which was like, if we were king of the world and could implement whatever education policies we wanted to, because as a club came up with a kind of extensive list, and one of them was charter admissions policies that just take all students a certain age and lottery spots within the district, because I agree with you that that's a really big problem in charter schools, is that parents who enter charter lotteries are not necessarily the same as parents who don't.
Is it time for a roll service snack break?
I'm sorry, we called you long enough. Yeah. I think Mikio is actually setting up snacks back in the original room, so if you guys want to go over there, we'll probably chill out for about 20 more minutes, and then Paul Toner is going to be giving a talk.
And remember to grill them with your interesting questions about your evaluation.
Is the lottery the this thing? But yeah, I just know the registration, we were the ones who sent out.
Yeah. Last minute update.
Sorry to both of you talking about the amount of money. The 14 points of
My friends like posted on his page.